Picture this. You're married for 23 years. You have two beautiful children. You live in a house with a white picket fence in a quiet suburb. Your husband kisses you goodbye every morning and tells you he loves you. You believe you know everything about the man you share your bed with, the father of your children, your partner for life. Now imagine discovering that this man has been photographing you while you sleep, taking pictures of your daily routines without your knowledge, documenting the cleaning supplies in your own home, mapping out the wooded areas behind your house, and writing notes that say, "Soon, my love, very soon." This is the story of Sarah Martinez, a registered nurse, a devoted mother, a woman who thought she was living the American dream until October 15th, 2019, when she found a phone that wasn't hers wedged between her living room couch cushions. What Sarah discovered on that phone would not only shatter her world completely, but it would also seal her fate, because the man she had loved and trusted for over 2 decades had been planning something unthinkable, and he had been documenting every step of his plan with hundreds of photographs. This is one of the most chilling cases of premeditated murder ever captured on camera. A case where the killer's own obsessive documentation became the very evidence that would send him to prison for life. A case that proves how modern technology can expose even the most carefully planned crimes. Tonight, we're taking you inside an investigation that will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. This is the story of how a collection of digital images became the key to justice for a woman whose only crime was trusting the wrong person. But I must warn you before we continue. This case contains disturbing details about domestic violence, murder, and betrayal. The events you're about to hear are real. They happened to real people, and they forever changed the lives of everyone involved. If you're ready, hit that subscribe button and turn on notification to encourage Crime Vault and to hear more of this story. Then let's begin with Sarah Martinez and the perfect marriage that was nothing but a carefully constructed lie. Before we dive into this shocking investigation, I want to take a moment to thank every single member of our Crime Vault family. Your support, your comments, your shares, they mean everything to us. It's because of you that we can continue bringing these important stories to light and ensuring that victims like Sarah Martinez are never forgotten. If you're new to our channel and you appreciate the detailed investigations we provide, please consider hitting that subscribe button right now. Ring that notification bell. Join our community of true crime enthusiasts who believe that every victim deserves to have their story told with respect, accuracy, and dedication to the truth. Your subscription helps us grow this family and continue our mission of examining cases that matter. Now let's return to Sarah Martinez and the photographs that would change everything. Spring, 1995, Phoenix, Arizona. Sarah Rodriguez was 22 years old, studying to become a registered nurse at Phoenix Community College. She had dreams of helping children heal, of making a difference in the world through medicine and compassion. Sarah was the kind of person who stopped to help injured animals on the side of the road, who volunteered at local shelters on weekends, who believed in the fundamental goodness of people. That spring semester, she met David Martinez in the college cafeteria. He was studying business administration, 24 years old, charming in that effortless way that made everyone around him feel like they were the most important person in the room. David had dreams too, dreams of building his own construction empire, of providing security and stability for the family he hoped to have someday. Their courtship was like something out of a romantic movie. David would surprise Sarah with handwritten notes tucked into her textbooks. He'd show up at the hospital where she was doing her clinical rotations with small bouquets of wildflowers picked from the desert surrounding Phoenix. He'd tell her about the house they would build together someday, the children they would raise, the life they would create. Sarah's friends remember her transformation during those months. She glowed when she talked about David. Her eyes would light up as she described their weekend adventures, hiking through Camelback Mountain, exploring the red rocks of Sedona, planning their future together under the vast Arizona sky. By December 1996, they were husband and wife. The wedding photographs from that day tell a story of pure joy. Sarah, radiant in a simple white dress that her mother had saved for months to buy. David, handsome in a rented tuxedo, gazing at his bride as if she were the only person in the world. Sarah's mother, Maria Rodriguez, would later tell investigators through tears that she had never seen her daughter happier than on that wedding day. If you could have seen those photographs, you would have believed in their love story too. The late 1990s were good to David and Sarah Martinez. David's construction business, Martinez Home Solutions, grew steadily as Phoenix experienced a housing boom. He specialized in custom homes for middle-class families, and his reputation for quality work and fair prices spread throughout the valley. Sarah worked as a registered nurse at Phoenix Children's Hospital, pouring her heart into caring for young patients and their families. She was good at her job. More than good, she was exceptional. Parents would specifically request Sarah when their children were admitted. She had a gift for making frightened kids feel safe, for explaining medical procedures in ways that didn't scare them, for being the steady, comforting presence that families desperately needed during their darkest hours. In 2001, their first child was born, Isabella Martinez, a beautiful baby girl with Sarah's dark eyes and David's infectious smile. Sarah took maternity leave and spent those precious months marveling at the miracle of motherhood. David was attentive during those early days, getting up for midnight feedings, changing diapers, taking hundreds of photographs of their daughter's every milestone. 3 years later, their son Miguel completed their family. Sarah often joked to her coworkers that she had won the lottery of life. A loving husband, 2 healthy children, and a career that fulfilled her soul. She would show pictures of her family to anyone who would look, talking about David's latest construction project or Isabella's performance in the school play or Miguel's first steps. In 2008, they moved to Millbrook Heights, a quiet suburb 30 minutes outside of Phoenix. The house on Maple Street was Sarah's dream come true. 4 bedrooms, a white picket fence, a rose garden in the front yard that she tended every morning before work. David hung a tire swing from the old oak tree in the backyard, and on summer evenings the whole family would gather outside, Sarah pushing the children on the swing while David grilled dinner and told stories about his day. Their neighbors remember the Martinez family as the epitome of suburban happiness. They hosted 4th of July barbecues, participated in the neighborhood Christmas decorating contest, and were always the first to offer help when someone needed it. Sarah would bring homemade soup to sick neighbors. David would shovel elderly residents' driveways after snowstorms without being asked. From the outside, their life looked perfect. And for a while, maybe it was. But perfection, as we all know, is just an illusion. And beneath the surface of this seemingly ideal marriage, cracks were beginning to form. The 2008 economic recession hit David's construction business hard. Housing starts plummeted. Families who had been planning to build custom homes suddenly couldn't qualify for mortgages. Projects that David had counted on were canceled overnight. Martinez Home Solutions went from thriving to barely surviving in a matter of months. David tried to hide the financial stress from Sarah at first. He would leave the house every morning dressed for work, maintaining the pretense that everything was normal. But as weeks turned into months, with no new contracts, the strain began to show. He became irritable, snapping at the children over minor infractions. He started drinking more, claiming he needed to unwind after his long days of trying to find work. Sarah began working extra shifts at the hospital to help make ends meet. She would come home exhausted after 12-hour days, caring for sick children, only to find David distant and moody. When she tried to talk to him about their finances, about cutting back on expenses, about finding solutions together, David would become defensive and angry. "I'm handling it," he would say, his voice cold in a way that Sarah had never heard before. "You focus on your job, and I'll focus on mine." But Sarah wasn't stupid. She could see the bills piling up on David's desk. She could see the stress lines forming around his eyes. She could feel the growing distance between them, like a chasm that widened a little more each day. Isabella, their daughter, was 17 by then, a senior in high school preparing for college. Years later, she would tell investigators that she began noticing changes in her father around 2017. He became secretive about his phone, stepping outside to take calls even when the conversations seemed routine. He would disappear for hours at a time, claiming he was meeting with potential clients. But Sarah noticed that these meetings never seemed to result in actual work. During family dinners, David seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone, responding to text messages that he wouldn't explain. When Sarah would ask about his day, his responses became increasingly vague and defensive. "Work stuff," he would say. "You wouldn't understand." Sarah's sister, Carmen Rodriguez Wilson, lived in Los Angeles, but she and Sarah talked every single day. Carmen began to notice changes in Sarah's voice during their phone calls. Sarah sounded tired, stressed, uncertain in a way that was completely unlike her. "She told me David was working late more often," Carmen would later tell investigators. But when she would call his office, his secretary would say he had left hours earlier. Sarah was starting to wonder where he was spending all that time. The woman who had once glowed when she talked about her husband now spoke about him with confusion and growing concern. She began to question things that had never occurred to her to question before. Why was David so protective of his phone? Why did he seem to have so much work to do, but so little income to show for it. Why did he flinch when she touched him, as if her presence startled him? But Sarah Martinez was a nurse, a healer, someone who believed in fixing things rather than giving up on them. She told herself that they were just going through a rough patch. All marriages had difficult periods. David was under stress because of work, and stress could change people temporarily. Once the economy improved, once his business picked up again, once they got back on their feet financially, everything would return to normal. She had no idea that David was already planning for a future that didn't include her. October 15th, 2019. A Tuesday morning that started like any other in the Martinez household. Sarah was running late for her shift at Phoenix Children's Hospital. She had worked a double shift the day before and had slept through her alarm. David had already left for work, or at least, that's what he claimed he was doing these days. Sarah was rushing around the house, grabbing her scrubs, her lunch, her car keys, when she heard it, a phone ringing. But not her phone. She could see her iPhone charging on the kitchen counter. This was a different ringtone, coming from somewhere in the living room. Following the sound, Sarah found herself standing next to their sectional sofa, the ringing getting louder. She moved the cushions aside and found an older model iPhone wedged deep between the cushions, its screen lighting up with an incoming call from someone listed in the contacts as simply A. Sarah stared at the phone in her hands, her mind racing. She didn't recognize it. It wasn't David's phone. This was a newer model, and he carried it with him everywhere. Could it belong to one of the children? But Isabella was away at college, and Miguel used an Android phone that looked nothing like this one. The phone stopped ringing, but the screen showed dozens of missed calls and unread text messages, all from A. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Every instinct told her to put the phone back where she found it, to pretend she had never seen it, to go to work and forget this had ever happened. But Sarah Martinez was a nurse. She was trained to investigate symptoms, to look for clues, to piece together information in order to help her patients. And right now, every symptom was pointing to something being very, very wrong. She tried to unlock the phone, expecting to be stopped by a passcode, but David had never been good with passwords. He used the same 4 digits for everything. 12 and 96, their wedding anniversary, December 1996. The phone unlocked immediately. What Sarah found in those text messages would haunt her for the rest of her life, which as it turned out, was only going to be one more day. Months and months of conversations between David and someone named Ashley. Messages that started professionally. Ashley appeared to be a real estate agent who had initially contacted David about a potential construction project. But the tone quickly became personal, then intimate, then explicitly romantic. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through message after message. David telling Ashley about his dreams for their future together. Ashley sending photos of houses they could buy together. David complaining about his complicated situation at home and how he was working on resolving it permanently. But it was the more recent messages that made Sarah's blood run cold. Ashley had written, "I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. When will you be completely free?" David's response, "Soon, baby, very soon. I'm handling the situation. Just need to take care of one final obstacle, and then we can start our real life together." Ashley, "What kind of obstacle?" David, "Don't worry about it. Some problems solve themselves if you're patient and strategic." Sarah felt like she was going to be sick. She called in sick to work, something she had done maybe 5 times in her entire 20-year nursing career. She sat on her living room floor, surrounded by the remnants of the life she thought she knew, and continued reading. The messages revealed that David and Ashley had been together for 8 months. They had taken trips together, trips that David had claimed were work-related conferences. They had been looking at houses together in other states. They had been planning a future that didn't include Sarah or the children. But the text messages were just the beginning. When Sarah opened the phone's photo gallery, she discovered something far more disturbing than a simple affair. The phone contained hundreds of photos. At first, they were what you might expect. Pictures of David and Ashley at restaurants, vacation photos from trips Sarah knew nothing about, intimate selfies that confirmed the physical nature of their relationship. But as Sarah continued scrolling, she found images that made no sense in the context of an affair. Photos of the interior of her own home, taken from unusual angles when she wasn't there. Pictures of her daily routine, leaving for work, coming home, getting the mail, all captured from a distance as if someone had been watching and documenting her movements. There were detailed photographs of household items that seemed completely random. The cleaning supplies under the kitchen sink, the tools in David's workshop, The layout of their backyard, multiple shots of the wooded area behind their house taken at different times of day, and from different vantage points. Sarah's breathing became shallow and rapid as she realized what she was looking at. These weren't random photos. They were surveillance, documentation, preparation. And then she found the photograph that made her understand the true scope of David's betrayal. It was a picture of her own bedroom, taken while she was sleeping. The angle suggested that David had stood at the foot of their bed and photographed her unconscious form. On his nightstand, clearly visible in the photo, was a handwritten note that read, "Soon, my love, very soon." Sarah ran to the bathroom and vomited. When she finally stopped retching, she looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman she didn't recognize, pale, terrified, and finally understanding that the man she had shared a bed with for 23 years was planning to kill her. Sarah spent the entire day going through every photograph on that phone. She took screenshots with her own device, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. She tried to make sense of what she was seeing, tried to find an innocent explanation for photos that clearly had no innocent explanation. By the time David came home that evening, Sarah had constructed a timeline of his planning. The photos showed a progression, starting with simple surveillance shots of her routines, escalating to detailed documentation of potential methods and locations. The most recent photos, taken just days earlier, showed David testing different cleaning products on various surfaces and photographing potential burial sites in the desert. Sarah was waiting in the kitchen when David walked through the door. The phone was on the counter between them. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. David looked at the phone and Sarah watched his face change. The man she had loved for over 2 decades became someone she didn't recognize, cold, calculating, and completely unrepentant. "You were never supposed to find that," he said, his voice eerily calm. "This complicates things considerably." According to the detailed statement Sarah would later give to police, a statement that would be found in her own handwriting, hidden in her jewelry box. David didn't deny anything. He didn't apologize. He didn't try to explain or justify his actions. Instead, he told her exactly what he had been planning. He had been documenting her routines for months, learning her schedule, identifying windows of opportunity. He had researched methods of disposal, scouted locations in the desert, purchased supplies. He had been planning to kill her and disappear with Ashley, leaving no trace of what had happened. "You were going to ruin everything," he told her, his voice filled with a rage that Sarah had never seen before. 23 years of marriage, and you were going to destroy it all because you couldn't mind your own business. Sarah tried to reason with him. She talked about their children, about the life they had built together, about the love they had once shared. But David looked at her as if she were already dead. "It's too late now," he said. "You know too much." That night, Sarah wrote a detailed account of everything she had discovered and hid it in her jewelry box. She wrote letters to Isabella and Miguel, telling them how much she loved them and how proud she was of the people they had become. She took photographs of the evidence on David's phone and emailed them to herself from a computer at the public library. Sarah Martinez knew that David was going to kill her, and she did everything she could to make sure that when he did, there would be evidence to convict him. October 17, 2019, Phoenix Children's Hospital. 6:45 a.m. Linda Chen, the charge nurse on the pediatric intensive care unit, looked at the schedule board and frowned. Sarah Martinez was supposed to have started her shift 15 minutes ago. Sarah was never late. In 20 years of working together, Linda could count on one hand the number of times Sarah had been even 5 minutes behind schedule. By 7:30 a.m., Linda was worried. By 8:00 a.m., she was making phone calls. "This isn't like Sarah," Linda would later tell investigators. "Sarah was the most reliable nurse we had. She was the person we called when we needed someone to cover an extra shift, when we had a particularly difficult case, when we needed someone we could absolutely count on. She didn't just not show up, ever." Linda tried calling Sarah's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. She tried the house phone. No answer. Finally, she called the hospital's human resources department to report that one of their most trusted employees had apparently vanished without explanation. But Linda Chen wasn't the only person who noticed Sarah's absence that morning. Margaret Foster was 78 years old, a retired elementary school teacher who lived next door to the Martinez family. Margaret had been watching Sarah's morning routine for over a decade. Every day at 6:30 a.m., Sarah would come out in her scrubs, water her rose garden, check the mail, and wave goodbye to Margaret if she was outside. On October 16th, Margaret had noticed that Sarah's car hadn't moved from the driveway. On October 17th, she realized that Sarah's morning routine had been broken. The roses were wilting in the October heat, the mail was overflowing from the box, and Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Margaret Foster had taught elementary school for 42 years. She knew when something was wrong with one of her kids. And Sarah Martinez, despite being 46 years old, was still one of Margaret's kids. At 2 p.m. on October 17th, Margaret Foster called the Phoenix Police Department to report that her neighbor was missing. When Detective Maria Santos arrived at the Martinez residence, she found David in an unusually cooperative mood. He invited her in, offered her coffee, and seemed genuinely concerned about his missing wife. David explained that Sarah had been upset about their marriage lately. They had been having problems, he said, financial stress and communication issues that had been building for months. On the morning of October 16th, Sarah had told him that she needed some time to think about their relationship. She had packed a bag and left early that morning, saying she was going to stay with her sister in California for a few days.
I thought she would call by now,
David said, his performance of concern almost convincing. She's never been gone this long without checking in. I'm starting to worry that something might have happened to her. Detective Santos, a 20-year veteran of the Missing Persons Unit, listened carefully. She had heard this story before. The troubled marriage, the spontaneous departure, the concerned husband. Sometimes it was true. Sometimes it wasn't. Can I see Sarah's room? She asked. Maybe there are clues about where she might have gone. David showed her to their bedroom. Everything looked normal. Clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, no obvious signs that someone had packed for an extended trip. What did she take with her? Detective Santos asked. David paused for just a moment too long. Just some clothes, a small suitcase, her purse. But can you show me which suitcase? Another pause. I'm not sure which one. We have several. Detective Santos made a mental note. In her experience, husbands usually knew exactly which suitcase their wives had taken on a trip. The fact that David couldn't provide this basic detail was concerning. Detective Santos's next call was to Carmen Rodriguez Wilson in Los Angeles. Carmen's response sent chills down the detective's spine. Sarah would never leave without telling me where she was going. Carmen said immediately, we talk every single day for the past 25 years. I've been calling her for 2 days straight, and her phone goes directly to voicemail. Something is very, very wrong. Carmen provided crucial information to investigators. She told them about the changes she had noticed in Sarah's voice during their recent phone calls. The stress, the fear, the growing concern about David's behavior. Sarah called me on October 15th. Carmen said, she was extremely upset. She said she had found something that proved David was having an affair, but she said there was more to it than that. She said she had found photos that scared her, and she was planning to go to the police the next morning. Detective Santos felt her pulse quicken. Did she tell you what was in these photos? She tried to send them to me, but her texts weren't going through. She said David had been acting strange around technology lately, and she wondered if he was monitoring her phone somehow. She was really scared. Detective, Sarah was one of the bravest people I knew, but that night she sounded absolutely terrified. Did you try to convince her to leave immediately? Carmen's voice broke. I begged her to get in her car and drive to Los Angeles that night. I told her she could stay with me as long as she needed. But Sarah said she had to work the next morning, that she had patients depending on her. She said she would go to the police after her shift ended. Carmen paused, and Detective Santos could hear her crying on the other end of the line. Sarah never made it to work the next morning, did she? Armed with Carmen's testimony and a growing suspicion that David Martinez was not being truthful about his wife's disappearance, Detective Santos obtained a search warrant for the Martinez home. The Phoenix Police Department's Digital Forensics Unit, led by Detective James Morrison, descended on the house on October 19, 2019. What they discovered in David's home office would provide the breakthrough the case needed. Hidden in a locked filing cabinet, investigators found not one, but 3 additional phones, multiple SD cards, and a tablet that David had clearly been using for purposes far beyond normal communication. Detective Morrison would later describe the evidence as one of the most disturbing collections of premeditated documentation he had seen in his 15-year career. The devices contained thousands of photographs, detailed notes, and what appeared to be a timeline spanning several months. But it was the methodical nature of the documentation that made it so chilling. David had been treating Sarah's murder like a construction project, breaking it down into phases, documenting each step, taking progress photos, and maintaining detailed records of his planning process. The photos revealed David's methodical approach to planning his wife's murder. There were images of Sarah's daily routines taken from various hiding spots around their property. Pictures of her walking routes during her morning jogs, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, photographs of her work schedule pinned to their kitchen bulletin board, showing her shift patterns and days off. But the surveillance went far beyond simple observation. David had documented Sarah's habits with scientific precision. Photos showed which doors she used when leaving the house, which parking spot she preferred at the hospital, which route she took when running errands. He had captured her interactions with neighbors, her phone conversations in the backyard, her vulnerable moments when she thought she was alone. One series of photos showed Sarah gardening in the front yard, completely unaware that her husband was photographing her from their bedroom window. The timestamps revealed that David had been taking these surveillance photos for over 6 months. Detective Morrison found GPS data embedded in many of the photos, creating a detailed map of Sarah's movements and routines. David had essentially been stalking his own wife, treating her like prey that he was studying before the hunt. Even more disturbing were the photographs documenting David's preparation for the murder itself. Images showed him testing different cleaning products on various surfaces, apparently to determine which would be most effective at removing blood and DNA evidence. There were photos of David experimenting with different types of plastic sheeting, testing their durability and waterproof properties. Pictures of him researching burial techniques, photographing different shovel types, and comparing soil compositions in various locations. One particularly chilling series showed David practicing how to wrap and transport a large, heavy object. The photos were taken in his workshop, using what appeared to be a mannequin or large dummy wrapped in plastic sheeting. The metadata revealed that these practice sessions had been conducted multiple times over several weeks. David had also photographed potential disposal sites throughout the Sonoran Desert, taking detailed pictures of remote locations, access roads, and soil conditions. Each location was GPS tagged and included notes about visibility from nearby roads and the likelihood of discovery. Perhaps the most damning evidence was David's own handwritten timeline, photographed and stored on multiple devices. The timeline showed David's planned progression from surveillance to execution to disposal. October 16th was circled in red ink with the notation, Sess, leaves for work, 6:45 a.m., returns 7:30 p.m., opportunity window 11 hours. Below that, David had written a detailed schedule. 7:00 a.m., intercept, before she reaches car 7:30 a.m., transport to workshop 8:00 a.m., 2:00 p.m., disposal preparation 3:00 p.m., 6:00 p.m., desert transport, 7:30 p.m., return home. Establish alibi. The timeline included contingency plans for various scenarios and detailed notes about alibis David planned to use. He had researched Sarah's work schedule, her co-workers' routines, and even the timing of their neighbors' daily activities. At the bottom of the timeline, David had written, Afterlife with A begins. The investigation into David's secret phones led detectives directly to Ashley Morrison, a 28-year-old real estate agent who had been having an affair with David for 8 months. When Detective Santos showed up at Ashley's apartment, the young woman initially denied any knowledge of David's marriage.
He told me he was divorced.
Ashley said, her voice shaking. He said he lived alone, that his ex-wife had moved to another state with their kids. He seemed so sad about it, so lonely. I thought I was helping him heal from a difficult divorce. But when Detective Santos showed Ashley the photographs found on David's devices, the young woman broke down completely. The images revealed that Ashley had been an unwitting participant in David's surveillance of Sarah, providing information about David's daily life that he had used to plan the murder. He would ask me about my day, about my schedule, Ashley sobbed. And then he would tell me about his routine, about his roommate, who he said was just a temporary living situation. I thought he was just making conversation. I had no idea he was using me to establish an alibi. The text messages between David and Ashley revealed a more sinister dynamic. David had shared his frustration about his financial situation being tied up in joint accounts and property with Sarah. In one particularly incriminating exchange, David had written, Once I'm completely free from this situation, we can start our real life together. I just need to handle this one final obstacle. Ashley had responded, What kind of obstacle? David, nothing you need to worry about. Some problems solve themselves if you're patient and strategic. Following leads from the photographs, investigators obtained a warrant to search David's workshop behind the family home. What they found there provided the final pieces of the puzzle. Hidden beneath a tarp in the corner of the workshop, Police discovered freshly purchased plastic sheeting, the same brand and type that David had photographed during his experiments. Industrial-strength cleaning supplies with receipts showing they had been purchased just days before Sarah's disappearance. A new shovel with dirt still clinging to the blade, and most chillingly, a printed MapQuest directions to a remote area of the Sonoran Desert. But it was the digital camera found in David's toolbox that provided the most damning evidence. The camera contained the original, uncompressed versions of many of the photos found on his phones, plus additional images that painted a complete picture of his preparation for murder. One photograph showed David's practice session with what was clearly meant to represent Sarah's body, a mannequin wrapped in plastic sheeting, loaded into the back of his pickup truck. Another showed him timing how long it took to dig a grave-sized hole in desert sand. The most disturbing image was a photograph of David himself, taken as a selfie in his workshop. He was wearing latex gloves and holding a knife, with plastic sheeting spread out on his workbench behind him. The timestamp showed it had been taken on October 15th, the same day Sarah had confronted him about the affair. On October 20th, 2019, David Martinez was arrested at his workplace and charged with the premeditated murder of his wife, Sarah Martinez. Despite the overwhelming photographic evidence against him, David maintained his innocence, insisting that Sarah had left voluntarily and that all the evidence was coincidental or taken out of context. "You're making a mistake," David told Detective Santos, as he was being handcuffed. "Sarah left me. She was unhappy with our marriage and decided to start over somewhere else. Those photos don't prove anything except that I was trying to improve our home security." But David's calm demeanor cracked when investigators revealed the extent of the evidence they had found. When confronted with the timeline he had written in his own handwriting, David became agitated and demanding. "You don't understand," he shouted. "You don't understand what she was going to do to me. She was going to ruin everything I had worked for. She was going to take the house, the business, everything. I couldn't let that happen." It was a confession, captured on video, that would become crucial evidence at trial. The search for Sarah's remains became a massive operation involving over 50 officers, search and rescue teams, and volunteer groups from the community. Using the GPS coordinates found in David's devices and the locations he had photographed during his scouting trips, search teams combed through hundreds of acres of desert terrain. On October 23, 2019, search dogs alerted to a disturbed area of Earth, approximately 40 miles southeast of the Martinez home. The location matched exactly with one of the sites David had photographed most extensively. Sarah Martinez's body was found buried beneath 2 feet of desert sand, wrapped in the same type of plastic sheeting found in David's workshop. The medical examiner determined that she had died from blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with being struck multiple times with a heavy object. Near Sarah's body, investigators found additional evidence that tied David to the crime scene. Tire tracks that matched his pickup truck, footprints that corresponded to boots found in his closet, and most significantly, a receipt from a gas station near the burial site, timestamped at 4:37 p.m. on October 16, 2019. David Martinez had murdered his wife of 23 years and buried her in the desert, then returned home to establish his alibi and wait for someone to notice she was missing. David Martinez's trial began on March 15, 2021. After delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the prosecution, led by District Attorney Rebecca Williams, built their case entirely around the photographic evidence found on David's devices. It was, as she told the jury in her opening statement, a case where the defendant documented his own path to murder with such obsessive detail that he essentially prosecuted himself. The trial lasted 6 weeks and featured testimony from over 30 witnesses. Digital forensics experts walked the jury through thousands of photographs, explaining how metadata proved when and where each image was taken, creating an undeniable timeline of premeditation that stretched back months. Sarah's co-workers testified about her reliability, her dedication, her love for her family. They painted a picture of a woman who would never voluntarily abandon her patients, her children, or her responsibilities. Margaret Foster, the elderly neighbor, brought the courtroom to tears as she described Sarah's daily routine and how she knew immediately that something terrible had happened when that routine was broken. But perhaps the most devastating testimony came from Ashley Morrison herself. Taking the stand in a packed courtroom, Ashley described how David had manipulated her into providing information about his daily life, while concealing the existence of his wife and children. "I thought I was in love with a divorced man who was trying to rebuild his life," Ashley said through tears. "I thought I was helping him heal from a difficult past. I never imagined that I was helping him plan to murder his wife. When I see those photographs now, when I read those text messages, I realize that every conversation we had was him gathering intelligence for his plan. The defense team, led by attorney Michael Rodriguez, attempted to argue that all the evidence was circumstantial. They suggested that Sarah could have left voluntarily, with her death being the result of an accidental encounter in the desert. They claimed that David's photography was simply part of his construction work and that his relationship with Ashley, while morally wrong, was not criminal. But this strategy crumbled when the prosecution presented the camera evidence showing David's detailed preparations and his own handwritten timeline. The defense had no explanation for why an innocent man would possess step-by-step photographic documentation of how to dispose of a body, or why he would have scouted specific burial locations weeks before his wife's disappearance. Perhaps most damaging to the defense was David's own behavior during police interviews. Video footage showed David becoming increasingly agitated when confronted with specific photographs. At one point, he lost his composure completely, shouting, "You don't understand what she was going to do to me. She was going to ruin everything I had worked for. She was going to take it all." On April 28, 2021, after deliberating for just 4 hours, the jury found David Martinez guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances. The speed of the verdict reflected the overwhelming nature of the photographic evidence against him. As the verdict was read, Sarah's family wept quietly in the courtroom. David showed no emotion, staring straight ahead as if he couldn't quite believe that his carefully planned crime had led to his downfall. During the sentencing phase, Sarah's children, Isabella and Miguel, now young adults, delivered victim impact statements that left few dry eyes in the courtroom. Isabella, now 22 and working as a registered nurse like her mother, spoke directly to her father. "You didn't just kill Mom," she said, her voice steady, despite her tears. "You killed our family. You killed our sense of safety in the world. You killed our ability to trust. For months, I blamed myself for not seeing the signs, for not protecting her. But now I understand that you were so good at lying, so practiced at deception, that even the people who lived with you every day had no idea what you were planning." Miguel, now 20 years old, described the ongoing trauma of learning that his father was responsible for his mother's death. "You taught me to ride a bike," he said to David. "You taught me to throw a baseball. You came to my school plays and helped me with my homework. And all that time you were planning to murder our mother. How do I process that? How do I understand that the man who tucked me in at night was capable of such evil?" Both children spoke about their mother's legacy, her dedication to her patients, her love for her family, her belief in helping others. They talked about the Sarah Martinez Foundation they had established in her memory, providing support services for families affected by domestic violence. "Mom always believed in helping others heal," Isabella said. "We want to continue that legacy by helping families recognize the warning signs and get the help they need before it's too late." Judge Patricia Williams sentenced David Martinez to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In delivering the sentence, she spoke directly to the nature of David's crime. "Mr. Martinez, the evidence in this case shows a level of premeditation and callousness that shocks the conscience. This was not a crime of passion. This was not a moment of weakness or temporary insanity. This was a calculated, methodical plan to murder the woman who had loved and trusted you for 23 years. Judge Williams continued, "You didn't just take Sarah's life. You destroyed the lives of your own children and betrayed the trust of everyone who loved you. Your own photographs have shown us the depth of your deception and the coldness of your planning. You turned your home into a surveillance operation, your workshop into a preparation site for murder, and your marriage into a hunting ground. The irony is not lost on this court that your obsessive need to document your crime became the very evidence that ensured your conviction. In trying to create what you believed would be the perfect murder, you created the perfect case against yourself." Today, David Martinez sits in cell block 7 of the Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence, where he will spend the rest of his life. He has never expressed remorse for his actions and continues to maintain his innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against him. Prison records show that he has filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. Ashley Morrison left Arizona shortly after the trial and now lives under a different name in another state. She has undergone extensive therapy to deal with the trauma of learning how she was manipulated and used in David's plan. Through her attorney, she has expressed deep regret for her role in the events, however unwitting it may have been. Isabella Martinez graduated from nursing school in 2022 and works in the pediatric intensive care unit at the same hospital where her mother spent her career. Her colleagues say she has her mother's gift for comforting frightened children and their families. Miguel Martinez is studying criminal justice in college. With plans to become a victim's advocate, he has spoken publicly about his experience, hoping to help other families affected by domestic violence. The Sarah Martinez Foundation has helped over 500 families recognize the warning signs of domestic violence and escape dangerous situations. The foundation's motto, taken from something Sarah often told her patients, is "Healing begins with hope." The case of Sarah Martinez serves as a chilling reminder that domestic violence can hide behind the facade of a perfect marriage. Sarah's story shows us that predators can live among us, share our beds, raise our children, and maintain the appearance of normalcy while planning our destruction. But Sarah's case also demonstrates how modern technology can be both a tool for predators and the key to bringing them to justice. David Martinez believed that his meticulous documentation would help him commit the perfect crime. Instead, his obsessive need to photograph and record every aspect of his plan became the evidence that ensured he would never be free again. The photographs that David thought would be his roadmap to a new life became his path to a prison cell. The surveillance he conducted on his wife became surveillance evidence against him. The timeline he created for her murder became the timeline for his own downfall. In the end, Sarah Martinez got her justice not through the legal system alone, but through her husband's own arrogance and his belief that he was smarter than everyone around him. David Martinez documented his crimes so thoroughly that he essentially testified against himself. The warning signs that Sarah's family noticed, the secrecy around technology, the unexplained absences, the growing emotional distance, the defensive responses to simple questions, these are red flags that should never be ignored. If you see these signs, trust your instincts, reach out for help, make a safety plan, document everything, and remember that you are not alone.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this detailed investigation into the Sarah Martinez case. This has been one of the most difficult stories we've ever covered here at Crime Vault, but it's also one of the most important. Sarah Martinez deserves to have her story told. Her children deserve to have their mother remembered, and all of us deserve to understand how these crimes happen so we can work to prevent them. If this investigation has been valuable to you, if it's helped you understand how modern forensic techniques are solving crimes and bringing justice to victims, please take a moment to subscribe to Crime Vault. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our detailed examinations of cases that matter. Your subscription helps us continue this important work. It helps us bring these stories to light with the respect and thoroughness they deserve. It helps us ensure that victims like Sarah Martinez are never forgotten and that their stories can help protect others. Share this video with someone who might benefit from hearing Sarah's story. Leave a comment telling us what you think about this case. And remember that your engagement with our content helps us reach more people who need to hear these important messages about recognizing danger and seeking help. The case of Sarah Martinez reminds us that justice can sometimes emerge from the most unexpected places. In this case, from the very photographs that her killer believed would help him escape consequences. David Martinez's obsessive documentation of his crime became the key to his conviction, proving that sometimes the truth will find a way to surface no matter how carefully criminals try to hide it. Until next time, this has been Crime Vault, where every case matters, every victim deserves justice, and every story has the power to save a life. Remember to stay safe, trust your instincts, and never hesitate to reach out for help when you need it. Thank you for being part of our Crime Vault family. We'll see you in the next investigation.